It's good. Welcome back, everybody. Photography Live and Uncut, episode number 108. My guest today says it's his favourite number. Peter Dench, welcome to my show, Peter.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, you took your time, didn't you?
I took, yeah.
What did I have to do to get in the top 100?
No answer to that. I do apologise. You put me on the spot. I'm so sorry for taking my time to find contact with you. I first came across you, though, through LinkedIn, which is something which over the last year I sort of just been building up. It's quite a strange social network to work through, but I'm getting used to it very slowly. It's not quite like Facebook, but
every time I published the book, I thought maybe now Paul will call.
Well, there we are.
The numbers going up, but I'll accept 108. That's so it's a
108. Okay, fair enough. Well, as my dad would say when I was playing cricket, if you're on 108, you're seeing the ball well. On you go, on to 150. Peter, thanks for joining me. It's really great because looking at your website extensively this afternoon, I really get an impression that there's some influences with respect and some inspiration. Am I correct? Martin Parr and William Eggleston come to mind?
We've been talking less than a minute and you've already mentioned Martin Parr. I thought we could have gone for at least 2 or 3. But
I'll try.
Yeah, I acknowledge the influence. Rarely does a day go by in my personal or professional life where Martin Parr isn't mentioned by me or to me. And I don't think you can photograph in colour in England without that comparison being made. And he's so prolific, obviously there are Parr parts in every sort of reportage that is done on this nation and beyond. So I embrace it, I acknowledge it, and I like to think I may have arrived at my style of photography regardless of Martin Parr, but he certainly helped the process, at times hindered the process, not personally, but that association is something that's sometimes beneficial and sometimes not. And I've been called the affordable Martin Parr, Martin Parr Light, and Martin Parr's drunken brother in various dispatches, which the latter I hope is down to the content of what I like to photograph rather than my personal behaviour. And Eggleston, of course,
it's a good. I would put it this way: it's a good association to have. And really, at the end of the day, if you're a lot of people say it's not copy. Of course not. It's just a case of a particular style works with someone. I think really, as you said, you made a good point, which is going to be my next question to you about color against mono. Going through your work there, I can see I can't recollect seeing any mono photography. Is there a particular reason for that?
I think so. I put it down to where I grew up, which is the seaside town of Weymouth. The first things I ever saw were saturated colours, deck chairs, blue skies, the red arrows, the arcade, bumper boats. I don't see in black and white. I think I've shot less than 10 rolls of film in black and white over 20 years. I just can't see in black and white. And I think it's easier to take a good black and white photograph. I think it's harder to shoot in colour. A lot of people now, they just happen to shoot in colour. I think I'm a deliberate colour photographer. I consider it, if you look through my work, there's probably a primary colour in most frames. And I think Tom Stoddard, who's a mentor of mine, he says if you photograph a woman in a yellow dress, is the yellow dress, but if you photograph her in black and white, you see her soul. And as much as I respect Tom, I say nonsense. I just see a picture without colour. And people show me pictures, and they often ask, "Is it any good?" And then they desaturate it, and they say, "Is it any better?" And invariably it is, because it's quite difficult and it's a challenge to get colour right. So that's what I enjoy.
I've got to be honest with you. I can't make my mind up whether I like shooting in mono or shooting in colour. I think there are times where either style suits whatever you're out shooting, whether it's a street, documentary, or a pure landscape.
Yeah,
It is, as you say, it's we see things in color, and I suppose because of that, a lot of people will associate taking a photograph in color a lot easier than looking at something in mono and saying they can see the tones, they can see the light, they can see the and sort of bring something to life with a mono image. So I think this is where it's a contentious opinion, because you've just said there, Tom Stoddard's comment, you look at a mono image, you can see someone's soul. Well, now that's always that is a very, very popular answer by someone who's who prefers to shoot in mono as against in color, and others will say color confuses the issue.
Yeah, I understand that, but we haven't got lots of work with photographers,
No, exactly. Yeah.
Perspective, color. I think they're all to be sort of embraced.
I agree with you. I think both sides should be embraced. As in actual fact, whether you're shooting mirrorless, whether you're shooting full frame, medium format, or large format, all genres, all styles should be embraced, and it suits the particular photographer and his style.
Yeah,
how did this all start for you, Peter, with the photography? Was there a camera in the household when you were a young lad that caught your eye?
I was fired from every position of responsibility I had by people I was responsible to as a teenager. So I realized quite early on that I wasn't very good at having a boss, being told what to do. And the only thing that was still there when everything else was stripped away was photography. So I didn't get my first camera until I was 14.
Okay.
And I got it to replace the cricket bat. So I was a promising young opening batsman and medium pace bowler for my school. But I just could never quite get over the nerves of striding out to the middle of the crease to open the batting with the real possibility of immediate failure. So, I'd be sort of feeling nauseous 2 weeks before a game.
Really?
Becoming sort of quite destructive. So, I just decided that to sort of sell my kit. And then, I asked my dad for a camera for Christmas, and a Pentax ME Super was unwrapped from under the Christmas tree. So, it's been there for a long time. And, I realized, a few years later that I'm not from a wealthy background. And if I was going to travel the world and have a few drinks along the way, it would have to be at someone else's expense. And I realized that photography was, then it was a good tool for a working class lad to climb into social situations that we wouldn't ordinarily find ourselves. I think that's changed now. You probably need a trust fund to succeed, and that route, that we had, and Bailey had, and McCullin, not that I'm comparing myself in any way to them, has dissipated. So it wasn't so much about the photography, but more about the places it could get me, and in a way that still holds true.
So you're saying, by the sound of things you're saying, around about the age of 14 or 15, the interest in photography had started. You followed that right through the back end of your school. Did you go on to college or university? I
was 14. I was photographing coots and herons and the wild butterflies, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It takes 2 or 3 years, and then I started photographing, my mates, and then my mum's mates, and then you kind of think, okay, this is quite interesting. So I studied it at A level. Then I did a 2-year national diploma at Bournemouth, where Wolfgang Tillmans and Nick Knight were doing the higher national diploma, if I remember. And then I went on to do a 3-year degree at Derby in photographic studies. So but that was more of a time to mature than actually, rinse the facilities at Derby. I think I was the only person at Derby, along with my friend Jonathan Worth, who didn't photograph ourselves or our friends naked. It was that kind of course where photographers like Cindy Sherman and Joe Spence were held up as ones to aspire to. so I was completely unprepared. You know, I graduated in '95, moved straight to London, and I had no idea what to do. You know, I didn't know who a picture editor was. I didn't know what they did. I didn't know what an art director was. I didn't know what they did. So I kind of had to just sort of reboot from scratch. So I signed on the dole for 2.5, 3 years. And then, as you had to do then, the only way to see the people that mattered was to, you know, to pound the pavements and present your portfolio in person. So around about 98, 99, it started to happen, you know, and luckily I didn't have to go through the ranks of, you know, working for the Nursing Times or the, you know, the first few jobs I had were for the Sunday Times magazine and GQ. And then once those two are on board, you kind of get into Marie Claire, and yeah, it was good. It was good.
Then it moves on from there. Who actually, at that stage when you got that sort of work for the Sunday Times, were you given projects to do, or were you coming up with ideas for projects to present to be put into the magazine?
At that time, I did. You know, I wasn't necessarily coming up with ideas, but I was being proactive. So I'd go and see Aidan Sullivan at the Sunday Times.
Yeah.
He'd say, you know, you're not ready. This isn't good enough. And I'd listen. I'd take his comments on board, and then I'd go back and see him 6 months later, and he'd say, "You've progressed. You're still not good enough." And then I'd go away, and then after a year and a half, you know, I go in and he says, "Actually, I think you're ready. Here's a job for you." And that's the way it is, because then he believes he's helped me. He's involved in my development. He feels slightly, you know, as though he's sort of nurtured me. And the reward was a commission documenting life in England's most popular lay-by, the old Willoughby lay-by on the A303. So I spent a couple of weekends there, just documenting the human traffic that came by. You know, missionaries on their way to Exeter to spread the joy of Jesus, men looking for other men, the army, you know, going the other, holiday makers, you know, farmers, that kind of thing. And it's a story I'm really proud of, and it's a way I enjoy of working, where I'm in a fixed position. You know, I'm not great at chasing stories across countries. You know, I want to know I'm in this hall or this town or this street or this lay-by, you know, for the next however many days, and, you know, make the story happen. And I have a perimeter. I like perimeters.
Yeah, I was just looking at the titles here of the projects which you got on your website, which is it's a great website, because you really, I get the impression that everything you've done here is on on this site. Dench Does Dallas, which is a bit of tongue in cheek when I read the report on that one. The British Abroad, Alcohol in England, England Uncensored, the football's hidden story, and then we go on to others. And I get the sense exactly how you describe that they're basically very tight-knit sort of projects which you've either set for yourself or you've been given to do, rather than, as you say, trying to chase people around, I don't know, a war-torn country, for argument's sake, Tom Stoddard or a Don McCullum type style of work. I'm intrigued to know, how did Dench Does Dallas come about, apart from the obvious comments that I saw you make? Debbie Does Dallas, etc., which will interest the fellas that are watching this program.
But
I'm not going to search it now.
Well, there are two things that shaped my impression of Dallas as a teenager growing up in the late 70s, early 80s. You know, one, of course, was the soap opera, and you know, and then one was the adult film Debbie Does Dallas. You know, both quite similar, really. One about pistol packing, face slapping, greedy oil tycoons, and the other one about, you know, pistol packing, bum slapping, greedy, whatever. But so how did that come about? Well, all right, I'll try and make this as snappy as I can. But, my first three books were on Britishness, and even though I've worked in over 60 countries across the globe on assignment as a photojournalist. People were starting to sort of tag me as, a British photographer. And while that's okay, I don't mind that, because they're the books I produced. Getty Images, reportage by Getty Images, and I decided that it would be good if I showed that I could, produce a book on somewhere else. And so I had an idea that I wanted to go to America. Every photojournalist, I think, has to add their voice to that, archive of work. And I was keen to do so. And that's as far as it got. And then I had a chat with a chap at Olympus, and they helped fund the British Abroad book. And I asked them why, and they said timing. He's a man of few words. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, we think it might make a good exhibition for a new space we have opening. And I said, that's great, but it's done. I'd like to do something new. And he said, what? And I was on the spot, and I just knew I wanted to go to America. And then I just rattled through the alphabet, landed on D, had a nice ring to it, bit of alliteration. Dench Dozen. He said, send me some figures, which I did. And then he said, do it. So, I mean, that was a real sort of jackpot, as it is for all photographers.
Exactly right. How long did the project take you to complete? Let me rephrase that question. How long was the project supposed to take, and how long did the project end up taking?
Right. Well, listen. You got headphones. Alcohol in England was 10 years. England's Uncensored.
Wow.
10 years. The British Abroad was 36 days. So I'm thinking, you don't have to be precious about these things and spend an enormous amount of time. So, so I'm 44. The clammy hand of mortality is starting to squeeze. So my attitude now is have an idea, get things done, get them out there, move on. So I went to Dallas for 14 days to shoot.
2 weeks.
And I took a few days off. I had to have some me time, of course. So I think it was 10 days, the actual shooting of the pictures, which doesn't sound a lot. But when you've got nothing else to do, I get up at sort of 7 o'clock in the morning, go out for 5 hours, and then it's only midday.
Yeah.
You think, and then you shoot for another 5 hours, it's still daylight, and then you shoot for another 5 hours, and you've got the evening. So you can actually, get a great deal done. And Olympus never set me a brief. They never expected me to deliver, certain things. It was just up to me, and that's an absolute holy grail for me as a photojournalist, is just to be able to be funded to wake up and be uninhibited and go out and look at the world and make pictures. So that was a real treat. And then I got back sort of early July, and then by November there was the book and exhibition up in Bermondsey in London. So job done.
Fantastic. In terms of the writing side of it, that's down to you, or was that created by someone else, third party, so to speak? The writing of the book, or was there any? Was it just?
I do it all myself, right?
Good.
I saw that on Amazon, if you do a sort of a book of photographs for 10 years, and then someone else writes the foreword, it comes up as joint authorship. And I saw about 5 or 6 years ago that writers were being asked, this is editorial commissions, magazine commissions, writers were being asked to take the pictures. And I thought, well, that's not great. I think it's better if a photographer can write the words. So I decided, then to start, to make a concerted effort to make sure I was on the ball when it came to writing as well. So I do it all.
That's good, because I know there are some guys that do go out and take the photographs and say, right, okay, there's the photographs, there's the idea of the project. Bill Cunningham comes to mind, the American street photographer, for fashion. there's the photographs, put the words together, and I'll tell you where the photographs go in terms of the layout. And I think there are many other photographers, especially in America, that work that way. Someone I was just trying to think of actually while you were talking there, very similar sort of approach and start to his career, Joe McNally, where basically he was knocking on doors, and it was a case of, no, you're not ready yet, son. Go away and let me know. And eventually they gave him a project. And then, of course, he decided to hang out of a helicopter to take a photograph of a model, and, and I believe nearly lost his job. But anyway, that's another story. Let's go to.
I thought you were going to say, let's go to line 1.
Yeah, to line 1 for a question. No, not quite.
Well,
let's do a screen share because you should be seeing your page here, and we'll hopefully we'll be able to see the images from Dallas here as regards to the project which you created. And I was very intrigued to hear you say that, okay, you had some me time in Dallas, but basically you were getting up at 7, shooting for 5 hours, taking a spot of lunch, and then going out and shooting for another 5 hours.
That's correct, yeah.
What's the style of shooting that we're doing here? Are we, I'll say we collectively, yourself, are you going out there? No, I'm not going to use the word snapping away. That's a terrible comment to make. But are you just shooting as you see it, or are you looking for something in particular?
Yeah, difficult question. I mean, I had sort of appointments during those 2 weeks. You know, it's a bit dumb. You're going to go somewhere and not have any sort of fixed points where you have to be somewhere. So it was a bit of both, you know. I don't mind the term snapping away, and I did that a lot. And I also sort of, I panic in the beginning. So I think that I'm there and people want to see, Peter Dench pictures. So I'll start, photographing in bars late at night, and I actually get a bit bored of that. So I get them out of my system, and then I think, okay, what next? And I don't drive. So I did Dallas, which is quite a large area. There's a 40 miles sort of from east to west to Fort Worth. So I'd do it with public transport, on foot. So I was walking about 20 kilometers a day, 30-degree heat, and it just forces you to look a lot harder. So I picked up a lot of pictures en route to places I had to be at a certain time. And then when I actually got to my destination, sometimes they weren't very fruitful in providing good pictures. But it's important to know that for me, that I have to be somewhere every now and again, just to keep sane. Otherwise you can just sort of, as I sort of hinted at before, I do need sort of a certain discipline, whether that's a perimeter or an appointment or, an event, just to sort of structure the day. Otherwise, I'm not very good at just going off on a tangent. So, a lot of this picture here, this one here is, I'd been out for 18 hours and I just wanted a cold glass of Sancerre in my hotel bar, but the hotel bar had been overtaken by a lingerie themed night. So, I hauled the camera out of the bag one final time.
Reluctantly, I would, by the looks of things.
Oh, it was an absolute sort of chore, Paul.
It was. I bet it was.
But you forget, I don't blend as well as I used to in these kind of situations. There is a time, a certain tolerance for me being there, which generally seems to be about half an hour before people start to go, who is that? Who is that man?
Yeah, exactly. When you're in these situations, you're doing this sort of walkabout and you're taking photographs, and you're obviously trying to you're doing your photojournalism. That's a very important comment which you've made a couple of times now, photojournalism as against street photography.
Yeah,
have you ever had any trouble, any problems at all?
What, photographing the type of things I have?
Yeah, exactly. Have you had any confrontations with people that you photographed?
No, I've only ever been punched in the face once. in 20 years of photographing, and that was in Leeds. And I think if anyone knows of Leeds, you're in the minority if you leave that city without having had a physical incident.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that was when I stepped in. I was there photographing, but I stepped into a domestic incident to stop something that was happening. So, I mean, I'm not ashamed to be a photographer. I never shoot from the hip. The camera's always up here.
Yeah.
I never, if someone sees me taking a picture, I'll never go, oh, sorry. I have a short, clear sentence prepared, so someone goes, what are you doing? I'll say, I'm Peter Dench, I'm here doing a reportage on alcohol in England, or, I'm in Dallas doing a reportage. So it's quick. And they either say, that's fine, carry on, or that's interesting, or I'd rather not, you didn't photograph me, and then you just have to walk away. But that's a minority. So,
yeah,
I think it's just quite disarming if you're passionate about what you do, you're honest, you're open, and you're not sort of embarrassed, which I think
you make a very good point there, actually, because I don't know whether you saw one of my previous programs with Scott Kelby, where he came across.
There are 107. I haven't seen them.
Well, he was show about number 90. Okay, something like that. But anyway, I'm disappointed you haven't watched some. But Scott Kelby thought that street photography was sneaky, and he thought, in actual fact, it was going to be the first genre which would disappear in photography terms because of that attitude. And I just let him go with the flow, quite honest with you. But I must be honest, at the end of the day, I had to turn around and say, look, done properly and not sneakily, as you say, by being open and prepared to talk and doing things properly, and at times maybe having to introduce yourself and maybe give a business card over, that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with street photography, or as you correctly called it, reportage or photojournalism type work. Because my personal feeling is, if the likes of work that you're doing, whether it's England, whether it's Dallas, whether it's Ibiza, wherever, is very important, because it's the history of what's actually going on in our world now. If we don't have that, what are people going to look back to reflect on and say, well, that's what it was like in 2015, 16, 1994 or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I call myself a photojournalist because I was told early on, you can't just make funny pictures. You have to have something to say, an anthropological legacy. And, I subscribe to that. And, the reportages that I do, I do want them to be a segment of history, and I think the Alcohol in England work in particular documents a decade when we were drinking, longer, faster, younger, more cheaply than ever before. And in 2008, from then until now, I have seen a shift away from what I was witnessing then. So I hope that will be an important visual document of that time. I hope the British abroad will be the same. Maybe cheap holidays will end. Maybe everyone will sort of repulse the British. They won't suffer us any longer, and that will be, the visual sort of go-to archive of what it was like, during that period of time. And that's all we can do. And I think sneaky is harsh. There are journalists like, again, I'll mention Tom Stoddard, who suggests, we do need to be quiet, blend, use your Leica, shoot and move. But that's respectful as well. I mean, and for me, photography is a collaboration. I wouldn't want people to see my work as sneering at my subjects. They're all very familiar to me. I've rarely had any people upset with the way in which they've been portrayed. I'm in contact with a lot of the people that I have documented. You can exchange prints more easily now with digital files, so it is a collaboration. It's not take. But I'm just sort of running your comments around my head. But I'm not a street photographer. I like to have something more to say.
Yeah, I think that the general gist of I think what you're saying here is the fact that your particular work is a project. You choose where you're going to go, and you stay within that boundary, which is very important by the sound of things as regards to the way you select your project, and you work within that boundary. A street photographer, I suppose, to a degree, is, well, let's go and find out what I can find, and let's just enjoy the day. And if I can find a couple of incidences down the line, which in a roundabout way tells a story, I think everyone likes to think that a street photographer is trying to tell a story, then I'll take that image. But you're sort of really, how do I want to put it? You'll really bring it down to a finite topic in terms of a study, and what you're creating that topic is through the photograph rather than the written article.
That just makes it easier for me to turn around and tell my wife and child why I'm leaving them for a weekend. The way you put it, I think it's almost braver, for a street photographer, because they don't know why they're going out. They just know they're compelled to, and at least I can say, well, it's the hardest thing as a photographer is to keep swinging your legs out of bed, to leave the loved ones behind, to spend money that you might not have with no tangible reward. So if you create, Homer Sykes, he'll be propelled out on to take pictures for a word, a keyword: love, rain, happiness. We all need that. We need something sort of that will sort of justify what we're doing, especially if you've got a family. I think it's, where are you going, love? Oh, I'm just going out for 8 hours. Why? How much are you going to... she's not like this, but...
but I know where you're coming from, because I'm sure every photographer has got a photographer's wife is the photographer's widow, as they would probably say back at home whilst you're out. But it's different from your aspect, because effectively you're a professional. So you've got to get out there and choose your topic and work with that, obviously, to put some money on the table so you can have a slice of toast with your breakfast in the morning.
Yeah, and I can say that everything that I've started on a whim has eventually monetized itself.
Yeah.
Crudely, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the line, and that's what I always sort of advise young photographers starting out. I guess just trust your instinct. Because if something niggles you enough to want to go and document it, the chances are there's an audience out there for it as well. So, just
let's have a look at alcohol in England, because I know from what I don't frequent the bars like I used to in my younger days, but I do believe that the drinking culture is changing in this country. We still get the young whippersnappers going to the extremes, as you can see there.
Yeah, these pictures are from 1998 to 2008. The majority of them are in the early noughties, and I think attitudes by the young have changed. They seem a lot more concerned about being fit. I saw this on the idea of the young Brit abroad is this sort of flabby, sunburnt individual, and I didn't see that. I saw fit, toned, tattooed men, fighting hard to keep themselves, in the pulling pool. And so I think attitudes have changed. These pictures a lot of them look very old now, but I like that. The quicker they date, the quicker they become arguably more important, because they are of a time.
Again, my comment to you, referring back to, if this wasn't photographed, we wouldn't know what life was like in this period of time. I think it's very important work.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Whether it is comical or whether it is serious, photojournalism, street photography, I think is important work.
My job as a photojournalist is to photograph, today what I might be prevented from photographing tomorrow. I read Martin Parr 25 years after The Last Resort was first published, and I said, what's significantly changed? And he said, well, of course, you can't photograph young children the way I could back then.
Yeah, exactly.
We still can, but attitudes have shifted. So that's kind of, that frightens me. This picture you're on now, is smoking inside. I didn't know smoking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This character, it was his first drink since having heart surgery. I just love this, this sort of atmosphere of the pub that he's in. And now with technology, things seem to be changing a lot more rapidly. So
it is amazing how, as you say, times have changed so quickly.
That's good. We need things to change.
Yeah, things need to progress. You're quite right. Can we talk about the one question which probably a lot of my audiences have got quite a few viewers tonight, in actual fact, which is very pleasing to see. Thanks for joining us, by the way.
Thanks, Mel.
Let's talk about gear. First camera, by the sound of things, at the age of 14 was the Pentax. What did you develop on through from the Pentax? What was your next system, or did you stay with Pentax?
Yeah. Okay. Right. How do I put this? I used to say that you get into photography because you're either into women or you're into kit, and I've never read an instruction manual. But then I was told that was sexist, so I've revised it to you get into photography because you're into travel or you're into kit. And I've read more travel brochures than instruction manuals. So I'm not into kit per se or kit chat. But having said that, I am a Olympus visionary.
There's the answer.
Yeah, so I understand the importance of kit, but I don't fetishize it. I want it to do its job as quickly and as swiftly and as reliably as possible, so I can transfer what I see, as flawlessly and smoothly. So I don't have. I've never. All right. So to answer your question, I went for the Pentax ME Super, and then for 10 years, all the work you've seen in alcohol in England was shot on Mamiya 6, Mamiya 7, with a Metz bolted to the side. One body, 2 lenses, or I'd work with them in tandem. And that was it. I didn't really think about it. And then when the digital revolution came, I still didn't think about it. And I didn't want to change. I'm not that way, not wired that way. And I didn't want to change to digital until my style would transfer, with that. So and then it was at the time 2008 2009, there were 2 choices in my mind and in my colleagues' minds. You either went Nikon or you went Canon. And because the Canon had the video element to it, I went with Canon for sort of 5 years, and now in my 40s, as Matt Hart sort of talked about in one of your episodes that I have watched.
You watched that one?
Of course, yeah. We do want to lighten the load.
Yes.
I find what I'm using now, they're aesthetically pleasing and they're light. People want this camera pointed at them, and I want to point it at them, and I take more pictures. Now I'm using that sort of micro 4/3 format than it was becoming a burden getting the camera out the bag.
Yeah. And as you say, the Canons are. Oh no, this is. I've made this comment myself on another video that I've done, that I know Canon and Nikon are still not really ensconced in the mirrorless fashion, for want of a word, at the moment, but they are making their DSLRs smaller and smaller. But it's still, you look at this Olympus you've got there. I shoot with a Fuji. They are smaller cameras. from my aspect, I just enjoy the fact of having a camera, which is like having an old SLR camera where you've got the dials and the aperture working to hand rather than having to go through a menu. So let's just take it a stage further. And I must be honest, when I was looking at your work, I got the impression, I thought, Peter's not going to be a guy that's going to be, I shoot Canon because this, and this, and this. I didn't have a clue what camera you were using. And I noticed also in your biography, you make no comment with regards to equipment. So I got the impression from that equipment is not really the be all and end all of the creation of your work. But let me just ask you one question when you're going out. So you've got, that was an Olympus OMD, whatever, Mark 1, was it? 2?
This is the M5 Mark II.
You've got the M5 Mark II. So, okay, so you're going out. What gear would you take with that camera body?
Oh, what would I take? I'd take a bottle opener.
Lenses, I'm talking about.
Yeah, all right. Everything you've seen on my website is shot with a 35mm.
Okay.
About 90%, or the equivalent, whatever system you're working on. With the Mamiya, was that an 80mm? I don't know. Like I said, I just use what I've got. So 35. So I'll have to now my camera bag. I'll have two bodies, one with a 35mm on or equivalent, and one with a 50mm on. And then I'll have a zoom in case I can't actually physically walk that far.
Exactly. Yeah.
I always say that the zoom lens is the aging snapper's walking stick. I think it's
well, I've got to be honest with you. I agree with you 100%. But unfortunately, I made the cardinal sin of making a comment with regards to using a zoom lens of say for argument's sake, an 18-300mm lens for street photography, and I thought that was totally the wrong sort of lens. I then got a very, very polite email from a viewer who said, Paul, you've just called Jay Maisel a very lazy photographer. And I thought, I better be careful what I say in future. But
I'll say it for you. I think it's disrespectful using a zoom lens. I think if I'm, over there pointing a camera at person over here and I can't hear them, I can't smell them, I can't respond to them, and they're looking at me going, is he photographing me?
And if I can interrupt you there, that's the sneaky part. That's the sneaky part of street photography, which I was really referring to when I spoke to Scott Kelby. You can't do street photography with an 18-250 or 18-300mm lens on your camera. It's not fair.
No, and I want to. I think you can be more inconspicuous the closer you are.
Yes.
My comfort zone is 2 foot away from the person that I'm photographing, and a lot of the time they don't acknowledge me. They don't care. They've got their own lives to lead, their own baby to feed, beer to drink, venue to get to. I can walk with them, and but I want to be able to sort of respond to them if they turn around and go, "What are you doing?" I want to be able to hear that comment, and I want to be able to give them one back. It is a collaboration.
And with your photograph, you want to be able to react to it, which to me is exactly what reportage type work is, and exactly what street photography should be, in the sense that being open, being respectful, and not standing on the other side of the road and zooming in on a passerby. For argument's sake, how many times do we see passerby photographs now on supposed street photography social networks? It does get a little bit boring, to be quite honest with you.
Before you get another polite email, though, the zoom lens is a tool, and I understand it can be used effectively.
Used effectively and used correctly. You're quite right. I understand exactly where you're coming from. So let's talk about which really caught my eye, and the main reason which I asked you if you'd join me on my show was Dench Dozen.
Okay. Yes.
Another clever title of a book. Well done. Nice plug. Do it again when you're talking. Put it up, because the camera is. It's important that we show this, because it's the main reason that I wanted to. How did this book come about, Peter?
Well, Yeah, I should have an answer prepared, but it's not that simple. I started writing a column 5 years ago called the Dench Diary. It premiered in Professional Photography magazine, and it now resides at Hungry Eye. And the reason I started that, or was asked to start that, is because you only ever read of photographers' successes. The grants they've won, the exhibitions that are opening, the books they've got, and I've had my fair share, but I also am well aware of the lows, the down times in between those highs. So I wanted to sort of acknowledge that, and photographers were supposed to be seen as these shiny examples of success, constantly on the ball and succeeding day after day, and that's not the case. So I just wanted to be open and honest about what I had to do as a professional photographer when things weren't going so well. So so I started doing that, and then in my 40s or late 30s, I was a bit more comfortable with my craft and my place within photography. So I started to take an interest in other photographers, because photography is very competitive. It's quite selfish, necessarily so. You want to succeed. You want to get the commissions. You don't want to acknowledge the talents of your colleagues and your peers. And then I realised that one sort of, when I turned 40, that Jocelyn Bain Hogg wasn't going away. Martin Parr, obviously, and actually everyone's doing very good things. So I wanted to find out a bit more about how they did it, what motivated them, the way in which they did it. And so I just started, it sounds very simple now, but I just started hanging out with them, asking if I could, access their homes, see how they worked, have a route around their fridge, open some drawers, see what hangs on the wall. And so in 2011, I think I interviewed Martin Parr, went over for the afternoon, and that was published in Hungry Eye magazine. And then I was asked to do a few more, and then I got to 6, and then I thought, well, why not do 7? Dench does 7, doesn't have a good ring to it. So I thought,
there's a film. Come on, Dozens. Come on, that's it. That's where it comes from, wasn't it?
Doesn't. So I thought 12 is a good number to do it. And so it was kind of a hobby's the wrong word, but it was something I did during the quieter times, to try and get motivated by putting myself in the company of what I think, or who I think are exceptional individuals.
I think it's looking at the list of names here. I've had to sort of click up on hungryeimagazine.com. Looking at the names of the photographers here, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, there's 4 names on there that I'm familiar with: Brian Griffin, Martin Parr, Tom Stoddart, and your good self. And it looks in actual fact, there's a couple of pages in, and I'm not showing this on a screen share, but to me, just looking at one example of the page here, it looks a great layout where you've got some photographs and obviously your discussions and comments about these particular photographers. And it's as I did say to you before the show started, it was on my Christmas list.
Okay.
But that letter to Santa Claus went missing, and I ended up with another book. That's my excuse.
Quick, Paul, there were only 500 printed, so.
Only 500?
Yes.
And
yes.
I noticed also Great Britain's of Photography Volume 1. So I'm assuming there is another one to follow?
Well, to maybe. I mean, why not? I like to do something, try it, and then see if it works. And, I don't want to be held hostage to having to do it again. So we'll see if this works. The idea of calling it Volume 1 in my mind was so I could show it to a publisher and say, well, how about commissioning Volume 2? Because this was kind of done off my own back. It was 5 years from the first interview to print. So, it's more of, if someone said to me, here's 10 grand advance, 5 grand, do a volume 2, I'd get it done in 6 months.
Exactly right. It's a different. Just out of interest, did you do this on a Kickstarter type idea, or is it just totally funded by yourself?
No, it's not a pen. I took myself to the. I did the interviews, so I
Yes.
sort of funded the trips to Martin Parr's house, Chris Floyd's house, Harry Borden's. So that was what I funded, and then I handed it over to Hungry Eye, who found the Leica, provided the
Okay.
the printing. So that's how that got done. So again, these are very collaborative times.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, at the end of the day,
things were very selfish, and now it's a kind of like, this is what I've got. I've got 12 interviews.
yes,
This is what I have. Now we need some money, and and people, I think, are more open to collaborations and getting things. There's lots of ways to get your work out there now beyond the traditional 12 pages in the Sunday Times magazine.
Very true. And the reason I mentioned Kickstarter was a friend of mine actually produced her own book. Sandra Jordan, she produced her own book and just put some phrases. A very simple layout of book, but it's a very, very attractive book in terms of the photography. And she did it through a Kickstarter and sort of set a target of, I don't know, like £3,000, and she managed to get that, and it went out. I think she had some publication problems with regards to the printing problems and the like, but once that was all sort of ironed out, so to speak, I got my book through the post, and it's a nice little keepsake of her work. And I just wondered whether that was how you had gone about the funding.
I love crowdfunding. I've done it twice, and it's a great way of bypassing certain obstacles and getting it, selling books and getting it straight to the, straight to your audience.
Yeah,
but it's also an incredible ball ache as well. It's
a lot of hard work. I remember seeing her comments in the Hangout chats and everything. She said that. I've got what was it, about 150 books have arrived on my doorstep, and she's had to physically go through each one to make sure that it was how she wanted it to be, effectively.
Most publishers, not most, but Dowie Lewis now asks a lot of photographers to crowdfund a certain amount.
Yeah.
Of money. My own publisher, Blue Coat Press, the British Abroad, they asked me to crowdfund 2/3 of what was needed, and that's fine. It's quite a sort of distilling way of getting your work out there. And
I suppose the everyday photographer walking down the street, like myself, would dream of having a book published in their name, but it is such a difficult market to break into. Obviously you've got to have the work. That's the first thing that's recognized. Then the second thing, of course, you've got to have a publisher or a book company that's interested to publish that book. Yeah,
but people seem to be sort of plopping out books left, right, and centre now.
That's very true. There is another way of looking at it. Not to mention, of course, you can get your own book published yourself if you go to the likes of Blurb or many of the other that I can't remember the other publication firms. But
there's Unbound. Lots of ways. I think
lots of ways to do it. Peter, if I could put you on the spot for once. My favorite question to photographers: who would be your favorite photographer?
Is that a question? Who would be my favorite?
Who would be your favorite photographer?
Well, they're generally photographers who do what I can't, and
interesting.
And I like to think that they enjoy what I do because I do what they can't. And here, two photographers come to mind: Brent Sturton, one, and Marcus Bleasdale, who's featured in the Dench Dozen, who's a good friend of mine. And so these are yeah, I'm reading Here I Am about Tim Hetherington at the moment, who the Dench Dozen is dedicated to. Regrettably, one photographer that I couldn't interview, who I wanted to, and I knew Tim. So those kind of, I know what I'm not, and I know what I can't be, and I know I'm fortunate enough to know people who are like that. So that's it's there's no greater love in the world, Paul, than the heterosexual love between two men. And if you, I'm more comfortable in their company, because you take away that whole sort of jostling for the attention of females. Anyway, I digress. If you interview with Marcus Bleasdale, it's a love letter to a fellow heterosexual male, and he, and that's born out of respect for the work that he does and the way in which he does it. And I know.
I've just actually gone onto his website, because he is a name again. He's not one of the four which I mentioned. I have not, unfortunately, ever heard of him. But I'm just looking at his work here. I think, and it's the type of work which I understand what you were saying to me. It's not the type of work that you would do. This is a little. There's a scene. There's a photograph here of some guys eating some rice out of a bowl, and this to me is a Tom Stoddard type work, going out there in the field and exploring an area.
I could have added Tom into that sort of conversation. Well, and that's I don't know why they continue to uphold friendships with me, but from what I can gather, they'd struggle to take pictures in the situations that I put myself in, whether it's on a maybe in a boring situation, if that makes sense. So hopefully that answers.
That does answer my question, and there's two photographers which, be honest with you, I haven't heard of, and I'll certainly be checking those out.
Yeah, he did this wonderful. He does a lot for National Geographic. On hunting rhinos. Conservation. Okay. A brilliant picture of an ape, a silverback, being carried through, the jungle when he was on assignment for Newsweek, I think it was. And he's this, just to be in the company of these people, because Brent is with Verbatim and he was with Reportage with Getty, and and just to sort of observe them is quite sort of humbling, really.
Yeah. So my final question to you would be, of all those, forget photographers here for a second, who would you consider to be your inspiration?
Well, I'm more inspired. I'm more inspired by overheard pub conversations and columnists like Danny Wallace, John Ronson, Tim Dowling. These are the ones that feed my aspirations and my sort of look on life. I think it's unfair to single out a linear of influences. This photographer, this photographer, this photographer. I don't look at as much photographer as you might suspect, as much photography as you suspect I might. Because it's quite disabling. Everything's been done. Pretty much everything's been photographed. I think it was Simon Roberts, that said, do it differently or do it 5 years later. Apologies, Simon, if that wasn't you. But I kind of subscribe to that, and I often try and sort of narrow out, the noise or the great work that's being done, because it's too inhibiting. So, I just I try and sort of pick up my influences from the everyday, interactions that I have.
I've heard this mentioned before by many professional photographers, where they I'm going to use these words. It's not the words that they use. they're concerned that they may clutter their mind with and their brain with images of that have been created by someone, that they may end up inadvertently creating something similar that is not their style, if you get my meaning. They're going down a route which, no, I don't take. It's an attitude like, no, I don't take mono photographs of street photography or reportage work, so I don't want to be confused with someone like Henri Cartier-Bresson. And that has come out quite a few times, where people have made those comments with regards to not wanting to study too much of other photographers. But interesting enough, you make the comment there that you get your inspirations from hearing people talking, or maybe some words that you've read.
I do have a first-class honours degree in photographic studies, and it took me 3 years after getting that degree to be able to take the lens cap off without feeling like a misogynist.
Yes.
I had to unravel the John Tagg, the John Berger, the Alan Sekula, all that kind of thing, shed that and just free myself up to take pictures.
Yeah, that must have been very difficult. In all honesty, that must have been very difficult.
And there is, there's always, John Bulmer is featured in the Dench Dozen, and he was, photographing in bad weather, way before Martin Parr. He was photographing in colour, way before a lot of photographers we see as the godfathers of colour. And there's always a preceding influence or sort of echo of what we want to do, and you just have to embrace that, I think. Otherwise it can become paralyzing, and not to put too much sort of academic sort of fluff around that.
And I think that applies to all entertainment, really, with regards to whether it be an actor, whether it be a comedian, music. I think there's some very similarities of music coming through. I recognized something behind this arrangement, which I'm sure is for me back in the 60s and the 70s. And comedians that you see now, a couple of guys on the television, you think, well, that's straight out of the Eric Morecambe and Ernie Wise type style, and that guy's just like a Norman Wisdom or an Arthur Askey type style of comedian. So these sort of similarities do occur in basically every walk of entertainment life.
I'm more Benny Hill, I think.
Well, he probably, now you mentioned it, he's probably a one-off, that guy. And the other guys recently, Ken Dodd, obviously just got knighted, as did, quite rightly, thanks for posting up, Don McCullum got knighted as well. But yes, those guys were pretty sort of a one-off style. But you do see a lot of Les Dawson's style a lot of his work was taken from the comedians of the 30s, 40s and the 50s. Interesting things. Peter, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been fascinating listening to you talk about how you set your work up and how you've developed it through, and the projects and the way you go about your work. And the Dench Dozen, I'm going to give it another plug, is a must buy by the looks of things. And from what you've said, and I'm going to go and treat myself to this. I'm not going to wait for someone to buy it for me.
Well, it's quite pricey, but if you break it down, it's £4.17 per interview, which by London prices is a pint. So I think
exactly right. If you buy London prices, it's a pint. Yeah, I did see the price of 50 quid, and I thought it is a bit on the high side. But then, hey, come on, there's books out there, 45, 50, 65 pounds, which people will just go and buy. So I think this is it's a price in the middle of the park that basically is worthwhile, especially when we're talking about British photographers here. We're not talking about the guy from the other side of the pond.
They trusted me. A lot of photographers who I knew well didn't trust me enough to let me into their homes with a notepad and pen. Some did, and then other photographers like Brian Griffin, John Bulmer, who I didn't know, understood the concept. And once they said yes, there was no restrictions as to what I could or couldn't ask or see. And that's a real privilege. And I do. So you know, it's away from the usual interview, you know, Q&As and, you know, droll, dry, factual sort of academia that, you know,
Yeah,
I delivered, but hopefully it's something a bit more
I,
engaging.
I know exactly where you're coming from, because for me to speak to so many people involved with the photographic industry, and yes, you are number 108, but you won't be the last. So don't think it's not 100. It's not 108 and out. Don't worry about it. But
There was a petition as well, you know, of some of the contributors in London, if I can just mention that, from the 14th of February. So I'll be posting some of that through my social networks. Dench's Great Britain's.
nice one.
One of them
That's
didn't want to be involved, so you have to come and figure out which one.
That's a good note to finish on. When was the date again? The 14th of February.
Yes, at the Art Bermondsey Project Space in London.
I'll check it out. I'll check it out. If I'm around that time, I may pop down and see you.
All right, fantastic. Where are you?
I'm just south of London, a place called Bromley.
Okay, I'm heading to Millwall on Saturday.
Oh, so, enjoy.
FA Cup.
Oh, you're going to it's Leeds Millwall, is it?
It's Bournemouth Millwall. So
Bournemouth. Oh, right. Okay, so you're going down there. Right, enjoy.
Dip in and
out. I hope you get out alive.
Yeah, exactly. This could be the last.
This could be 108 and out, Peter.
All right, Paul.
Thanks again for joining me. It's much appreciated. Just to say to everyone, I know it's Thursday. This is my sign off, basically. I repeat this every time almost. I know it's Thursday and there's one more day to go to the weekend. But if you are going out shooting this weekend, leave your camera bag at home, but take your camera out and enjoy yourself. All the best to you. And thanks for watching. Bye for now.